This is going to be your guide to team building in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. The secret is you need to use all of the resources at your disposal to make sure everything is accounted for when making your Pokemon team, and this video will show you how to do that. So if you enjoy the video or if it helps out in any way, don't forget to leave a like, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts down below. So we're starting off with Pokemon Showdown's Team Builder. Now, I only recommend the Team Builder. The Battle Simulator, it's an imperfect simulator, has a lot of game mechanics actually wrong, and I don't trust it for fully emulating Pokemon battles. Also, it's unofficial. It doesn't count unless you're actually in the Pokemon game doing battles, so you're not going to get good practice, and you're also not going to get a good experience. Another recommendation when using Pokemon Showdown is that all of this is made up trash. If anyone says like, oh, that's an Uber, oh, that's, oh, you, they know nothing about Pokemon. They're also just playing like a made up baby rule set. It's really about the Battle Stadium rules, so that's what you want to check it against. And these rules will update as the series change. Also, for Link battles, there's nothing stopping you from doing flat rules 6v6 Battle Stadium singles, so that is what you want to hold on to. The problem is it does get a little weird between like restricted Pokemon and legendaries and stuff. Pretty much if it's a box legendary or a mythical Pokemon, you can't use it, then everything else is going to be good to go depending on the season. Currently for the Battle Stadium, past and future Pokemon as well as the Treasures of Ruin are also restricted, but that's probably not going to last long, mostly just because players are just getting into the game, so they're not going to have as easy access to the late game content and legendary Pokemon. But Koraidon and Miraidon are generally like universal bans, so if you're doing a 6v6 format, just Koraidon, Miraidon, unusable, and then you play Pokemon. Now I know that was a long intro, but trust me, the pretense is necessary because there's a lot of misinformation about how real Pokemon battling works because of the trash babies at Smogon. They try to assert their made-up casual rule set as competitive, even though they just ban everything they don't like, and it's not real Pokemon battling with how much they restrict, and they just do hilarious things like banning Dynamax, the gimmick of an entire generation, which is also the most balanced competitive gimmick we've seen in Pokemon. Weird stuff from some weirdo kids. Either way, let's get into the actual team building of Pokemon. Where do you begin? My advice for beginning is knowing what style you want to play around. Do you like fast Pokemon? Do you just always want to be the person that goes first, hits pretty hard, and eventually chips the opponent down to where they get run over? Do you just like running the strongest, best Pokemon out there? Or do you like bulking it up a bit? You know, survive a hit, deal a bigger hit back. What is your playstyle? Now, if you've never played Pokemon before, or if you're just like getting casual into competitive, you might not even know what suits you or what you want to do. In which case, I recommend just picking a favorite Pokemon. I don't recommend going like, oh, what's a team I can steal, you know? Give me the rental code, bro. What are the 6 strongest Pokemon I need to run, or what is the strongest Pokemon in the game I have to have on my team? If that's how you're playing Pokemon, you're playing wrong. You're not going to get any better at the game, and depending on where you're getting your information from, it's likely just going to be just not a good Pokemon. It's going to be severely overrated details and information and stuff, and it's not going to help you out at all. Which is why I say you gotta subscribe, hit that notification bell, check out all my playlists. I'm going to be doing moveset guides for every Pokemon in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And I also have a playlist of movesets I've already done for every other Pokemon, except for a few from Generation 8, because it just didn't really work out. But for the most part, those movesets should hold up to some kind of degree, and then you just kind of like splash in some of the new Pokemon, new mechanics, and it's at least a good starting point until I revisit those Pokemon. Either way, where are we going to begin with a favorite Pokemon? Now, some people are lucky. Their favorite Pokemon is Scizor, and this Pokemon is just broken. Other people, their favorite Pokemon isn't really that competitively known or used, and sometimes it's just hard to use a Pokemon. So you can still like try to make it work. You can build a team around that Pokemon, and with the Terrestrial mechanic, there's more ways of what I'm calling stealing wins in Pokemon than ever before. You catch someone off guard with some of the wackiest Terra combinations into some other wild stuff, and then like a moveset that only works with this one Terra type, and now you're going to just win off of the sheer surprise factor with a Pokemon that had no right winning. And that's also how you can get more out of your Pokemon and your Pokemon team by using all of the tools at your disposal, which we're going to be getting into. But I do want to make an easier to use team for this video, because when you start using lesser known or lesser used or lower stat Pokemon, that starts getting very technical, very advanced. Now, my philosophy in Pokemon is that pretty much every Pokemon is viable, as long as you can actually, like, use it. Certain pre-evolutions with Eviolite do count, but Pokemon, for the most part, has to be fully evolved, or at least have some kind of viable stats, like one thing over 100. A Pokemon like Golduck, I don't know. Actually, Golduck has found some, like, weird usage because of Swift Swim or Cloud9, but I mean, like, these stats are just so ugly that it's kind of been power crept and outclassed by everything, but you can still, like, find a spot for most Pokemon on your team, and Scizor has always been a really good Pokemon. So with the Terra mechanic, you can just do something very simple. You can go Steel, Technician, Bullet Punch, Max Attack, Choice Band, and then you just kind of win by doing an outrageous amount of damage. You also have some good core tanking stats. Because we're going Bullet Punch, we don't have to worry about speed so much, so we get as tanky as possible. We can do some nonsense like that. We also have, like, Lumberry or Citrus Berry into a Swords Dance setup, and depending on how you play it out, you just do really well and win. The movesets, the items, the EVs, all this other stuff will change as you build your team and you find out what you need to fit in. Or you can also just kind of say, I want to run this Pokemon with this moveset, and then you build around it. So Choice Band Scizor, you're going to have some one-dimensional elements. You're going to have a lot of one-dimensional elements. You can't use something like a setup move. You're just kind of locked into the move that you use, and that's going to kind of leave you vulnerable. It also means you're two-shotting everything in the game, potential one-shots with the Steel Terastallization, and you're also shredding one of your weaknesses, so instead of 4 times weakness to fire, 2 times weakness to fire, which isn't as bad. Now, I just said a lot of stuff, and if you don't know anything about Pokemon, you have no idea what I did, and unfortunately that's kind of the limit of this video, and why you need to watch all my content. In the description, multiple playlists, I've shown how to build every Pokemon, I have many different strategy guides on how the overall strategy of Pokemon works in general, and then other movesets and team building, and then you have to watch my battles. By watching battles, you can kind of see how I think about the game, kind of see what a dynamic experience looks like inside of Pokemon. And then that kind of translates into my best advice for competitive Pokemon: lose. As cliche as it sounds, it's just a fact. You learn more from a loss than you do a win. If you lose constantly because of one Pokemon, swap it out. Change up some of the other things around your team. Change up the moveset. Change up the item. Like, oh, every time I bring out the Scizor, it just gets spored by a Breloom. Lumberry. Now you can go and counter that Breloom because of Focus Sash and all the other interactions, or just other weird stuff. Sometimes the meta just isn't in your favor. Sometimes you have your style down, you know what you're doing, the team is good, but the meta is just temporarily going to counter you. And there's nothing you can do about that, because there's 1,000 Pokemon in the game that can all have different Terra types, items, movesets, abilities, and EV spreads that are just designed specifically to ruin your day. And there's also just going to be times when you have a battle locked up, you have the matchup set with your team, but the opponent is using something that only has like 3% usage on a move or a specific item or a Terra type that literally only that person is running on the ladder right now, and you just got unlucky enough to face them. Pokemon is a huge game of luck, and you're going to learn that really quick with crits, low accuracy moves, and extra effects, and all kinds of other silly things in the game. So, we have a Scizor. What do we build around it? Well, that's where we start plugging things in. Boom. Simulate the team. We have a Scizor. We can see what our offense is, so we can't really do anything to Fire-type Pokemon. Also depends on like the other moves and stuff like that. And we can see our weaknesses. Now, this calculation is done kind of weird because a 4x weakness is like minus 1.5 points, a 2x weakness is minus 2 points, and then so on depending on like the different values. And immunity is also worth 2 points. And overall, I kind of find this arbitrary where it's like, yo, 4x weakness to fire is very significant, and it can be more significant than 1.5x, but if your opponent doesn't have any fire-type moves, or if you Terra off of the fire, then this becomes less of a problem, but maybe you could still have a significant weakness to that type. This is just kind of like a good glance, like, okay, what do I need to back up a Scizor? Well, obviously a Water-type Pokemon, and then you can actually search through Pokemon Showdown for specifically Water-type Pokemon, and then that's where you have to know everything that you want to utilize. Do you want a fast Water-type sweeping Pokemon to back up your Scizor? Do you want a tanky Pokemon? That way if Scizor is about to eat a Flamethrower, eat a Flare Blitz, you just say, nah, I'm switching into a Toxapex. Now what? And then knowing all of the abilities and all the mechanics that the Pokemon has, oh, Regenerator ability, Pokemon restores 1/3 of its hit points when it switches out. So Scissor's in, you're just choice band, bullet punching, YOLO. They bring in something to stop your Scissor. Toxapex just says, not onto that. Toxapex switch-ins eats damage for free, but now you can just switch out and ignore all that damage, or also set up or play your Toxapex, Toxic a few fools, just be way too tanky, recover all the damage, and then if they bring in something else, now you're also ready to deal with that. So you have to think about these specific weaknesses of your Pokemon, and that's where we go into the other things. So now we can just kind of compare offensive and defensive pressures against our Pokemon. Here's an example, like a Gyarados that's Terra Fire. Let's plug that in first, and then like other move options that you have. Simulate it, wait a second, and here we go. Now, even though most people understand how Terra types work, I get questions daily, even though the game's been out for over 2 weeks, of people wanting to know how Terastal works in Pokemon, and I think the best way of showing it is this right here. So you become that type defensively. Like, that's it. You are that type. You are a mono defensive type when you are Terastalized, but you keep your original offensive types, and that looks something like this. So some people also wonder, what stab? If you are using the move of a Pokemon's type, it's called same type attack bonus, and we just call it stab because it's quick, it's easy, and that's what it is. So when you Terastalize in that Pokemon, you become the type. Therefore, you gain that stab, but you also retain your original stabs. Now, what happens if you go into water? Like, okay, I'm doubling down on water, one of my types. That becomes 2x stab, and then you keep flying, and now we're not fire anymore, and we're a pure water type defensively. That's it. It's that simple. So now we can plug in the Toxapex, and we can see what that Toxapex is weak to, if it's on its core typing, or if it's Terastalized. And you don't have to always and only use Machio or other websites. I think Machio is doing a really good job right now with game guides and also team building and trying to get close to like representing how you want to build a Pokemon team and understand Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. My only issue is that their current like attack calculator with the Terastalization is not as good as Pokemon DB, because with Pokemon DB you can plug in a Pokemon's moveset and you can see what resists you. So something like Scizor comes in, alright, what do I hit with my Bug and Steel Stab? Oh, a lot of Pokemon resist me. But Pokemon DB is currently flawed because it hasn't updated to the Generation 9 Dex, and it also doesn't have just the regional Dex of Pokemon you're going to be facing before Pokemon Bank or on the Battle Stadium. But it gives you an idea, like, okay, yeah, we don't hit Fire-type Pokemon, duh, because Steel, Bug are both resisted by Fire types. So that's something good to know, and then you have to think about other moves and other things you want to put in to make sure you're just kind of hitting every Pokemon, and then depending on like the other Pokemon and sweepers that you're using, you want to go for as many super effective hits as possible. That way, if almost any Pokemon shows up in front of you, you're going to be hitting it with some damage. Now, meta does apply. If there's not many Fire-type Pokemon in the meta, or if there's more Pokemon you're going up against commonly, then you want to kind of build your damage profile towards that. It's about using everything, however, everything is flawed. Pokemon DB isn't updated, this isn't as good as Pokemon DB for showing like the exact Pokemon and type combinations you're going up against, so let's add some actual offensive moves. Even though we're tank, let's say we have a Pokemon that has water, poison, whatever, this doesn't show us dual typings, this doesn't show us everything that's going to happen against the Dex. And then Pokemon Showdown is also just kind of broken and weird. Like, if we go back to this, it says Palafin's Uber. It isn't. That's another one of those Smogon lies, even though we have Battle Stadium single selected where Palafin's usable. Also, going back to the defensive stuff about Toxapex, you don't only have to use this website. I'm a boomer. I've been playing competitive Pokemon for over a decade. I'm just very familiar and comfortable with Bulbapedia, just kind of like looking at this. I can look at this, I can understand it, it looks nice and clean. But also, like, as you adapt and as you understand, you can look at this and also figure out what your Pokemon needs. But you can just kind of use everything. You can use anything, and then you can search things up specifically, and then you're building your team. So now we have a Scizor on our team. Now we have a Toxapex on our team. Where do we go from here? Again, we get some rough offense stats that don't represent our direct movesets, but still, like, decent to kind of look at and, like, make sure there's no immediately glaring problems. Then you can see our typing profile also looking pretty good. The ground coming in with the Toxapex, not the best, because we are going to be taking that 2x damage, and if we are going full Steel Terra, that could be a weakness on the Scizor, so something to keep an eye out for. Same thing on the Electric, so it's most like, yeah, this is where we are with the Toxapex, and you don't have to update this every time you add a new Pokemon to your team. You can build out most of your team. Like, what else do I want to run? You know, what's a cool new Pokemon that I want to see? Now, I don't like King Gambit, but maybe you do. And that also kind of like does similar things as the Scizor. You know, you have like priority Sucker Punch shenanigans, and then you can set up, and you also have Supreme Overlord, depending on how many Pokemon have fainted. 6v6, this is just way better than 3v3. And you also just have like a good stat profile. And just like, wow, extra tankiness, 100 hit points, 85 special defense. This thing's just like hard to knock out, and it kind of adds things to your team, but it adds another ground weakness. You're not really doing anything about those electric weaknesses that are building, but it's like, okay, if you're facing, you know, some kind of fire type move, Toxapex is the play. Now, what about for ground type Pokemon? We could look for Levitate. That's an option that people are getting really spicy with, because like Levitate Pokemon with Terra Electric is getting kind of crazy. Rotom, always just been a good Pokemon, just kind of sit in and not care. Unfortunately, Rotom Wash is going to be neutral to the electric typing because of that water, so maybe not. We also don't have to go Levitate because the flying type exists, and then we can kind of look for some cool flying type Pokemon you want to use. Maybe not King Gambit, instead we go Corviknight, because Corviknight's pretty cool. Maybe we keep King Gambit and we just find like something else. This is just going to be a switch into an Earthquake kind of Pokemon. Dragonite, because that dragon is not also going to get exploded by an electric type Pokemon. So yeah, if like Toxapex is getting threatened, bring in the Dragonite. If they don't two-shot you, which is very hard because of the multi-scale ability, you get a Dragon Dance. And now you are set up to win the game. You also might just discover some weird Pokemon, like, wait a second, Appleton? What does Appleton do for us? Well, a Grass Dragon typing is actually going to bring some outrageous synergy. Resistance to ground, for resistance to electric. Same thing for grass and water. Alright, let's actually, like, now that we've made significant work on our team, we can plug something in. Oh yes, look at that. No red on the total side. We're not going to get completely exploited by a specific type. However, the Ice 4X on 2 Pokemon feels kind of ugly, but just don't bring both of these Pokemon and a Pokemon that doesn't add a resistance to the ice. You know, if you bring Dragonite and Toxapex, or Appleton and Toxapex, and then one of your core sweepers, then like, yeah, every time you see an ice-type Pokemon, you go into Toxapex, and you position them around that till it's time for Dragonite to sweep. Maybe you put a different Terra type on your Appleton or your Dragonite, to where now you just completely remove that and change that to a different typing entirely, and there's no problems whatsoever. And now we're looking at team profile. You know, you can just kind of slap in 3, 4 Pokemon that you really want to run, that you like, that you think are cool, or maybe also just like, yeah, I think this Pokemon's strong, so I want to use them too. But then for like your 5th and 6th, now you're patching up the weaknesses, now you're just kind of adding some extra tech, maybe something that your team needs, and we don't have a lot of speed, even though Scizor, kind of an outright sweeper. It comes in, it can bullet punch, that's priority, so it's effectively like a sweeper, but only brings 1 damage type on the steel typing. King Gambit just takes a hit and then deals like some kind of hit back and breaks down Pokemon. Dragonite needs to set up. If Dragonite doesn't set up, it becomes a liability, and if it just gets KO'd by nonsense or chipped down or goes 1-for-1 or something, you can still get exploited in the rest of your team by an opposing sweeper Pokemon. So this is where we can look at sweeping stats. You know, high amounts of speed, what Pokemon are those going to be, depending on if you're doing 6v6. Fluttermane just kind of sits in here, then you're going to be fine. Jolteon has like Terra shenanigans, Weavile's strong, Meowscarada's strong. You know, depending on the team composition, you could just be missing a Pokemon that is very easy to use and plug and play. I kind of consider Meowscarada like a Greninja, to where you have a lot of different moveset options here. The Protean's interesting. I've already done a moveset guide on Meowscarada that kind of goes into the nuances of what this Pokemon's kit does, because Protean can screw you over now since it's only usable once per switch in. So like if you go off Grass Dark into something else, like you're just that typing now, and you have to commit to that moveset. Your Terra type also gets weird with those interactions. But hey, you got 123 speed, so you're outspeeding everything. But you also don't need just a directly fast Pokemon. You can sort by other stats. Do we need physical? Well, we have physical, physical, physical. So maybe we're looking for a special attacker. What is a hard-hitting special attacker that just kind of works? Oh, Golden Go. I've already done guide on how this thing's busted, but hey, if we need more speed, Choice Scarf. And now we just have like crazy damage on Choice Scarf, can use it as a status absorption. The Steel does kind of create some problems with some of the Pokemon we have, depending on like who we're using to cover for who. Hydreigon just kind of comes in as a pseudo-legendary. You put a Scarf on it, it two-shots a lot of Pokemon, and it has pseudo-legendary stats. Espeon is fast, hits hard, has Terra synergies. Calm Mind is a thing now. Actually, that means Jolteon might be the nasty Pokemon we are looking for, because Calm Mind is crazy, so you're outspeeding everything. If they have a special attacker, you Calm Mind, you just take no damage whatsoever, and now you can like run Life Orb, you can go Terra shenanigans, can add into your moveset. And then that just gets into, again, specific Pokemon moveset stuff that there's not enough time for in this video. So if you're running Jolteon, you go Jolteon Appleton Core. That way, if there's an Earthquake or a direct ground move that spooks you, you can bring in the Appleton. Also Dragonite even, like Jolteon Dragonite. That's where you can like rebuild the team for the individual things to keep an eye on. At this point, because Electric is only weak to ground and Dragonite brings the immunity, we're only going to be covering for the Dragonite mostly on our next slot Pokemon. So again, it's like, okay, what can take a dragon hit, take a fairy hit, well, not a dragon type Pokemon, so that excludes Appleton in this comp, eat ice and rock. Well, I mean, Toxapex probably fine with neutral hits because it's so bulky, then it resists a lot, so Jolteon Dragonite Toxapex Core works pretty well as well, depending on the Pokemon that you're bringing. You drop in the Scizor, and somehow you have no problems, and you also have to think about type profiles. Rock, you're actually not seeing a lot of Rock right now, and if you get hit, it's going to be a Terra Blast at 80 base power or Rock Slide at 75, and usually not from a stab boosted Pokemon. So even eating like a super effective rock move on a multi-scale Dragonite, not really a problem. Scizor neutral, Rock Slide, it just absorbs that. Jolteon probably even tanks it while setting up a Calm Mind and then winning the game. So even if you see a problem, like on the rock or something, it might not actually be a problem. Only issue here is that we have like innate bulk, but we don't have sustain, we don't have recovery, we don't have just like filth tanking. Maybe you don't need it. Maybe the meta is like, hey, this is Jolteon runs things over, Scizor runs things over, and if you give Dragonite a chance to set up, you win the game. Now let's say something on your team isn't working, you know, you don't like the King Gambit, you're not liking where Appleton's going because, yeah, you still got some weaknesses and you kind of have to dedicate a Terra type into it. Alright, what do I want? Do I want a full defense tank to kind of round things out? You can find that. Do I want a special defense tank? Do I want hit points? You know, what am I worried about? And depending on what you're worried about, you fill that in. GG, easy. You're going to win more battles. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.